Hi, I'm Leanne from BatLadyHerbals and welcome to my video. So today my husband and I are in New Smyrna Beach, Florida on the Canaveral National Seashore. We wanted to introduce you to a plant that is extremely important to the Florida ecosystem, especially coastal areas in that ecosystem, and that is the mangrove. Behind me there's a strip of trees that have a couple different species in them. But the three most prominent species on this area are going to be black mangrove, red mangrove, and buttonwood, which is a lot of times classified as a mangrove even though it isn't technically a mangrove. Now, you might have heard of mangrove if you've lived in Florida for any length of time, because the roots of the mangrove grow in the water, and they tend to grow in either brackish or salt water. And these roots are extremely important for the crustaceans and fish and wildlife here. Now, the roots provide a lot of food for our native birds and wildlife population, but it also provides kind of like mating grounds and places for young freshly hatched fish and crustaceans to grow before they move out into the bigger, deeper waters. Now you can see behind me some of these roots. The roots that are sticking up out of the ground and out of the water belong to the black mangrove. The roots that are going down into the ground belong to the red mangrove. This is one of the key identifying features of these two plants, because the red mangrove has what we call prop roots, because the red mangrove tends to grow in deeper water or areas where the tide doesn't recede completely at any point in time in the day. And so those prop roots help to hold it up as the tide and the current of the water is pushing in and out. Whereas the black mangrove, it likes its feet wet as well, but it likes to have a little bit more of a drier habit. So it tends to grow in places where the tide pulls back during certain parts of the day. And so to help it get oxygen during the times of the day when the tide is in, it sends up these little roots to help improve its oxygen intake. Now, a couple of the other identifying factors have to do with the leaves. You see, black mangrove has these little fine hairs underneath it that give it kind of a velvety texture. And while at the top, you can see it's got some crystals on it. Those crystals are accumulated salt. So if you're ever in a survival situation and you need salt and you happen to be on the coast, find a black mangrove, because you can harvest the salt and use it in your food. And it's considered to be a vegetable salt. And according to everyone who's tried it, it's supposed to be better tasting than any other salts you can find in the world. So while the black mangrove leaves are rounded at the tip, the red mangrove leaves are a little bit more pointed at the tip. And as you can see, it's shiny on both the top and a little bit more shiny on the bottom because it doesn't have that velvety texture that the black mangrove has. So the leaves and the roots are the two main ways to tell the mangroves apart. Another thing is that with black mangroves, we have all these little propagules or buds popping up. Now you notice it looks kind of like a lima bean here, but this is eventually going to grow into a whole new mangrove, whole new tree. And when you're talking about those with the black mangrove, they are edible, although they are considered a famine food, so I don't recommend them. The main reason they're considered a famine food is because until you process them in just the right way, they are toxic. And they aren't really reported to have the best flavor whenever they're done cooking. Usually things that are more on the toxic side tend to also be a little bit more on the bitter side as well. So really quickly, I just wanted to share with you, on a trail a little bit further away, we stumbled across a stand of white mangrove intermixed with a little bit of black mangrove. Now, if you remember, I mentioned that black mangrove leaves accumulate salt, and you can see the shimmer of salt crystals on this leaf really well in the sunlight here. And underneath, it's got that hairy, velvety texture to it. And if you look down, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but there's those little roots that are sticking up out of the water. And right next to it, we have this mangrove. As you can see, the leaves are a lot more rounded, don't have as much of a point. They're a lot more yellow, don't have any hairs underneath. And the most easily identifiable feature when it's not flowering are these little nodules right at the base of the leaf, which are extrafloral nectary glands. So they're glands that produce nectar that don't require a flower. And that is one of the distinguishing features of the white mangrove. Now, just a refresher on the Latin. The black mangrove is Avicennia gramineans, and the white mangrove, Langa curlaria racemosa. And forgive me for my butchering of the Latin. It's always fun to go on different trails in a place like the National Seashore, Merritt Island, New Smyrna, and see the different species in different areas, because this trail is a little bit further away from the areas where we find the black and red mangroves intermingling, because it's a little bit less in the water. Other uses for the black mangrove. Its bark and wood have been used in buildings for centuries. Now, as you can see, they don't get quite as big as some trees that we use for building. So most of the time it's used for ornamental purposes or for roofs, lining the inside of the home, lining the roof, sometimes even for decorative flooring. But the bark and roots also have medicinal properties that the Native Americans tapped into a little bit. And some of them are being studied in current research today, especially against certain cancer cells. So the bark and the roots of the black mangrove are antimicrobial and have been known, when ground up into a powder, to help stop the bleeding in some cuts. But you want to be careful with that because they do contain some toxins. So you want to make sure you prepare anything from this plant in just the right way. Now, it's also good to use against diarrhea and has some properties to bring down some fever. So it's a traditional use against malaria as well. Now, one of the traditional uses for this plant is the leaves and twigs were actually added to bath water to help women who were close to the end of their pregnancy during labor and childbirth. One of the other things this plant was used for was mixed with another plant common to the area. It actually provides relief from stingray wounds and helps to heal that wound without infection. Which, from that and the antimicrobial aspects of this plant, it makes it a great plant for skincare in general, and has been used for centuries for many kinds of wounds, not just for those of stingrays. Now, one of the other more interesting traditional uses of this plant is that the leaves and the twigs, and even sometimes the root, were used in a preparation that was used by the ancient people of the area as an aphrodisiac, helping to improve their nights a little bit. Now, the black mangrove, the Latin name for it is Avicennia germanes, and the Latin or scientific name of the red mangrove is Rhizophora mangle, probably named after those prop roots that look like they're mangling around. Since these trees tend to grow together, it makes it really interesting when trying to ID which one is specifically which. Because as you can see, this is a different bark than this. And if you follow the bark down, you see these reddish prop roots extending down to help prop this tree up. And if you follow it out, you find these leaves that are pointed and not velvety. So that means that this one is a red mangrove. Whereas this one that has the darker bark, you can follow it down and see that the leaves on this are rounded at the tip. It'll focus. They're rounded at the tip, and underneath is a velvety texture. And I can feel all the salt on that one. Then if you follow it further up, you can see that it goes down into those roots that are sticking up out of the water. So that one is a black mangrove. So if you are in a situation where you need to be able to tell the difference between these two trees, and they're growing in this kind of a habit where they're intertwined, just keep in mind the reddish prop roots, the pointed leaves that don't have velvety texture underneath belong to the red mangrove, whereas the other roots that are sticking up out of the water and the rounded leaves with the velvety texture underneath are the black mangrove. So thank you for joining me. Once again, I'm Leanne from BatLadyHerbals. If you like this video and want to help this channel grow a little bit, feel free to find me on Patreon and become a patron. You can also find my blog that has more information about some of the plants I talk about at BatLadyHerbals.com. I will link both of those down below. If you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you'd like to become up to date with things that I upload. Now, if you are curious as to what nature might have in store for you in your own backyard, I do something called backyard tours, where I come and help you look through your backyard and identify beneficial or even harmful plants that might be back there. So if you're interested in that, feel free to contact me. My information for that will be down below. And you can always find my shop on Teespring, where there's all kinds of designs to help promote hiking and herbalism in Central Florida. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day.